You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. Hello, Dave.
Hello.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Common Descent Podcast. This is Spotlight 2024, a special series we're doing all throughout the year, where we're sitting down with our fellow paleontology podcasters, science communicators, to talk about science communication in general. This episode, we are very happy to be joined by Dave Marshall. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
You are absolutely welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You are actually the only guest to appear in both of our Spotlight series. Because you were in the original Spotlight talking about invertebrates.
Yes, of course. And I would talk about them again if you would like. Please let me.
Any opportunity.
Good to know. That's excellent. Today, we are not talking about invertebrates specifically. We're here to talk about science communication. And we are very happy to have you here as one of these most seasoned of paleontology podcasters around. If any of our audience has managed to not hear about you or Palaeocast, please introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Dave Marshall. I am from the UK. I have a background in bugs, arthropods, especially sea scorpions. But then I also do micropaleontology for the oil industry. So I'm an industrial paleontologist, which is pretty rare nowadays. So we got academia, we got industrial. I also do science communication with the Palaeocast podcast, loads of different spin-off projects, a little bit of museology in there as well. So, you know, I've gone through a whole load of different paleontological jobs in my time. And then Palaeocast, the podcast, it's been going, we're into our 12th year now. So, yeah, it's been quite a while.
Yeah. Is Palaeocast the longest running ongoing paleontology podcast?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So it's not the first. That is Dinosaur George by, I think, a couple of months. But then I think he's stopped that podcast and is now doing like Dinosaur George for kids or something.
Okay.
So is that the same podcast? Is that a different one? But he's been doing it longer.
The podcast of Theseus.
But I've been going ages.
Yeah, well, we are thrilled to talk to you as a person with... Our podcast has now been going for a while. We don't think of ourselves as a long-running podcast, but we have been going now for several years, and it's always nice to get to sit down and chat with people who've been doing it even longer than we have. Get some of that old-timer perspective that we have now.
It doesn't change much. You just find yourself getting older, and everyone you're interviewing getting younger, and new things that you've never heard of. Like they're doing FEA 2.
That absolutely has been the experience. If you would please, on the note of Palaeocast, explain for us what is, in your mind, the goal or the mission behind Palaeocast.
It is a difficult one because when I started it, it wasn't really any particular goal that I had. I was sat in my company, looking down a microscope, being bored out of my brain, trying to stay awake, trying to stay focused. And I would listen to lots of podcasts, and there was never any paleontology in them. And when they were, you know, like just these general science podcasts that I'd get on the BBC, when there was paleontology, it was just dinosaurs. It was just like the barest little mention. Oh, we found a new dinosaur. Isn't that great? Moving on. And I was like, you know what? We really need some like paleontology podcasts. And then I had fortunately, I had all of the connections that I needed to be able to borrow their expertise and equipment to get started. And that was really just my goal, to fill that vacant space, to have a voice about paleontology. And so, yeah, I just found myself in that space. And now the goal, I suppose, is to keep occupying that space, to keep talking about different discoveries, different things that the audience might not be aware of, new studies, different Lagerstätte, different organisms, and just keep on producing content for those people that are enjoying it.
Yeah, be the podcast you wish to see in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has been a theme. Now, at this point, we'll have said this several times in the
Yes.
series. That is a recurring theme here, is people see an absence of a type of science communication they wish existed, and then they end up going out and making it. If our audience checks out Palaeocast, what can they expect from it? What is the experience of Palaeocast like?
Well, it's kind of built around my ignorance of the paleontological world. That's how it started. So the very first thing that we tried to do with Palaeocast, we booked a day in at the British Geological Survey, which is like the big professional museum without, like all that public display nonsense. Just big collections that you can only go to if you're researchers. This is where the real good stuff is. So we went down there, load of cameras, load of recording equipment, and we're like, yeah, we're going to record a podcast. And we got there, cracked out some fossils, and we started to talk about them, and we realized that we didn't actually know anything really about them, and we couldn't talk authoritatively on anything. It was so hard. And like, I'm just trying to think of it now. Like, what could I speak authoritatively on? And really, it's like just Palaeocast. That's it. That's what I mean. But yeah, it soon immediately became a sledgehammer to the noggin, apparent that we really weren't the people to be talking about this stuff. We need, the actual researchers. And so getting the researchers to tell the story of their own research, that became our thing. We are just the vehicle for them to tell their own stories. We just ask the questions, and I serve as like a proxy for the audience. I am asking the questions that they would ask, hopefully. Yes. And yeah, that quickly became our format, and then that stuck. And so that is what we give our audience, and that's what our audience comes for.
Yeah. I think that it is a very poignant point that doing science communication, educating, is one of the quickest ways to learn how little you know about a topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, completely. And the amount that I've learned doing this has been unbelievable. Not only in terms of the paleontological scientific content, the scale, the breadth, the diversity, disparity within paleontology and related fields, experiences of different people, the science of science communication. That was a huge thing for me to start to understand, and it was only getting myself in the position of being a science communicator and being like, oh wait, there's science communications is a thing. It's not just communicating science. It's a whole research subject of its own. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a whole lot that I've learned in that time.
Well, I like the way you described realizing that you can't be the authority on each of the fossils or topics you'd like to talk about, because that's something that we've talked about before, of trying to tread that line while being educators, of not wanting to present ourselves as the be-all end-all authority for all of it. I like that your solution was, well, I'm going to go bring some of those people who are the authorities on it and get them to talk authoritatively on it. And that's a nice response to that issue.
But also, there's a balance, because we do know a lot more than the average person. Definitely than anyone on the street. I mean, yes. I know what a gryphea looks like. I can explain what it is, when it's from, how it lived. I can place it in an environment, and all of that has its own value. Even if you're not the expert, you've still got to recognize that relative to other people, there is a flow of information that can come from you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance to find. But I would always, where I can, bring those experts onto my platform and give them the space to tell their stories. That's where I feel that Palaeocast has really found its place as a platform for these academics to tell their stories, to share their expertise with our audience.
Absolutely.
That is something about Palaeocast that really stands out to me as sort of an outside observer of it, is the ability of Palaeocast to act as an opportunity to support others in science and in science communication. Is that something that you started out with? Is that something that kind of has emerged? It seems like Palaeocast, there is the Palaeocast bump that people can get, this support to doing the things that people are trying to do.
I would like to think that's the case, yeah, for sure. And I try and share the platform where possible. And we've had like our first takeover, which was a few episodes ago, where we just say like, yeah, if you want to try your own podcast, come and use our platform for it. Why not? It's more content. Hopefully people are going to enjoy it. I don't have to be center stage in all of this. And I bring different, I've brought different researchers in throughout the lifetime of Palaeocast. Some have stuck with us, others have come for just a couple of years, then moved on. And so it's the diversity of voices, diversity of researchers, showcasing some of the different podcasts, other podcasts that are out there, because why just listen to our show when there's now 50 different shows to listen to? All of those have valid contributions to paleontological education that they have. I don't have to have, like complete control over this paleo podcasting world and paleontological communication. Like, I would love to just facilitate as much education as possible through whatever means, whether that is by bringing different people onto the podcast, whether it's by live streaming a conference and making it more accessible to as many people as possible. I just want everyone to love paleontology as much as I do.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that approach. I love that view of it.
It's a very admirable and valuable approach to take. I think that it can become so easy, and I will speak for myself personally, if you are a person who likes to talk and who likes to explain and who likes to educate, to find that balance, get yourself into that space of recognizing when to put the spotlight, as it were, on others.
Yes.
On other people to speak, on other people to take the reins, on other people to take center stage. Being able to recognize when the most effective thing you can do as a communicator is to not talk and let somebody else do it, I think is something that has come up also in other episodes of this series.
Yeah, definitely. What do I have to say about the value of not talking? Maybe I should just stay silent in response.
Ooh, that would be very
profound,
thematic.
meta.
Yeah, we'll leave a little gap in there.
Yeah, I've not really actually thought about that. What is the value of not talking? I guess, again, it would just be that I think other people have more to add to it than I do. Yeah, I think that really comes down to the value that you put in other people's contributions relative to your own. And yeah, I have a tiny slice of the paleontology pie in terms of my actual academic experience. So if you wanted to know about Eurypterids, Chasmotaspidids, which nobody knows anything about apart from like 2 or 3 people in the world, and a bit about industrial micropaleontology and the types of different foraminifera that you can find in a specific part underneath the Norwegian North Sea. I can talk to you at length about all of that. But yeah, the things that we want to tell our audience, other people are better at telling that story than I am. That's for sure.
Well, and I think all of this connects back to one of the ways you said it, that there is a balance, because we do have insights, and even if we aren't the experts, we might be able to help translate some of that information to the people who haven't had the background or the education to have the jargon or just the perspective. But that there does need to be a balance between your confidence in what you do know and being humble enough to know that you shouldn't always be the one that has to do that talking. Even though, like you said, David, that when you're the person who likes to do the talking, it can be hard sometimes to go, well, maybe I just let this person take the lead. I don't have to be the one constantly chiming in or constantly recentering the focus.
Yeah. And you can insert that in as well. So if someone's talking about, I don't know, phylogenetics of Norian reptiles, whatever, I don't know, and you'd just be like, okay, so that's looking at how these things are all related. Like there's a computational way of figuring out like which different ones are related to which other ones and like their likely closest relatives, and you put that on the Norian reptiles, which would be in the Triassic, right? And you can insert your knowledge in a way that isn't like, hey, look at me and my knowledge. It's facilitating the communication,
helping to clarify or make it more accessible,
like what you just did with me then. Exactly. Make it clearer, more concise and authoritative.
It's all happening live right here on the podcast.
And we've said this, but it's one of the best things about having a partner is that me and David can do that for each other constantly. While I'm stuck in my notes that I've been focused on to make sure I'm trying to get all the information right, David can be like, and that word means this? I'm like, yes, it does. It does mean that.
Now, of course, we're talking about finding the value in choosing when to speak, choosing when not to speak. But of course, our voices become prominent representatives, as it were, for the science we're talking about, for science communication. And you, Dave, are one of the more prominent voices in paleontology science communication for a while. What thoughts do you have about your voice being this conduit through which people are learning about paleontology?
I what do I think about that? That is so that is a really difficult thing to answer, because I don't think of myself in this too much, because I want to get away from the position of, like being that person that people are learning from, because I really don't. I'm sat in my bedroom. Not my bedroom, in my office, sorry. I'm sat in my office all alone in Manchester. So it's a really difficult thing to get my head around, because I'm not thinking that much about the knowledge exchange in terms of the impact that it will have, and kind of like the recognition, the, I don't know, respect, or the profile that brings. It's just me sat in my office in Manchester on my own, looking at a computer screen, speaking to another person. I don't think about the impact that will eventually lead to. But yeah, my voice is, it does have an impact though, and people do tell me, they'll come back and I'll get the odd bit of fan mail that says like, oh, I've really been inspired. I've really found a love for paleontology because of this. And so I do see the value of my voice in that. However, there's also a lot in, and I've been thinking about this a bit recently, in what my voice is and who I am, which sounds incredibly navel-gazing and potentially even worrying. But there's a lot wrapped up in that. So first of all, there's my authoritative position, and that all feeds into a question of why I'm doing the science communication. And there's a lot of what would be called deficit model in terms of like how the science is communicated. So it would go from a concentration of higher knowledge to a concentration of lower knowledge, and it would flow that way from me, the person who has all of the knowledge, to the audience who have none. And so that is kind of problematic in terms of science communication for a load of different reasons, but equally it is the format that best suits a podcast because it's
Mm-hmm.
unidirectional. There's
Yes.
only 3 of us talking right now. We control this place and the knowledge transfer, and all of the things that you, the audience, are listening to right now are just coming straight out of my head. I can start talking about dogs. I can start talking about the mouse on my desk. It's a Razer mouse. Hey, look at that. Razer Basilisk V2. There you go. And I control this. So who am I in all of this? And that's one part of my voice. How do I get away from prescribing what you, the audience, are going to hear and turn it more dialogic? So we're having a discussion. What do you want to hear? Like, what kinds of questions do you want to ask? And that's something that I think Common Descent does better than Palaeocast by a huge margin, especially like with all your Discord and stuff like that. Really impressed by that.
Well, thank you. It is something that we have strived to do since the beginning, to always give our audience at least a little bit of agency in what we talk about, what sort of topics come up on the podcast, to get around that exact problem that you're talking about. That at the end of the day, it's me and Will talking about whatever we decided to talk about.
Yes.
And then the other part of my voice as to who am I, that is also an interesting one, because I don't really know in a podcast context. And the voice that you're hearing right now, this isn't my normal voice. This is my clear voice. This is the voice that I use when I'm trying to to get points across. So it's a problem, and it's called, what is it? Code switching.
Yes.
Where you change your syntax, you change the language, you change the words, you change the rhythm, you change your enunciation, and basically I delete myself. My accent is gone. Well, I only have a very soft Northern English accent, but it goes more towards this British received pronunciation, which is like this BBC accent. And so it becomes more like a TV presenter. Yes. And this is the voice of authority that people would know from documentaries, that you know from news, that you would know from politicians. It has kind of an authority, a legitimacy, an inferred intelligence, and it kind of gets rid of who I am, the Dave that I am. Like, my accent's gone. I'm not talking normally. Like, you don't have a conversation with people that is so one-sided. You guys have only just like responded yes in the last 5 minutes of my monologue. This isn't how normal people talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just here with my usual like British TV accent, and that has so many connotations with the rich, the elite, it's a middle upper class accent that comes from London, and it isn't real. Like, the majority of the people in the UK, and by far the majority of Palaeocast's audience, they don't speak with this accent, and yet here I am trying to sound like someone off the TV, and it's not me. All these people have regional accents. So where is this like regional accent for me? Why am I getting rid of it? Where is the representation for the working class, which I am, or also non-native English speakers, so ethnic minority accents? Like, these are by far the people that we should be trying to connect with, and yet I am not representing myself as being from within this demographic and speaking to these people that I want to reach the most. So should I bring more of my Manchester accent into it?
Right.
Apparently, okay, I'll try and talk absolutely normally. So, hello, give me something to talk about. What have I done today? What am I going to do later? I'm going to play Helldivers 2 some more.
Oh, yeah.
Have you guys been playing it?
I haven't played it yet. I've watched tons of clips, but I really want to try it.
It is amazing. I've been having the most fun. I did my first level 9 Helldive on it, and I got absolutely splattered by a load of arthropods, which is kind of bittersweet because I like watching them.
Yeah, right.
But I didn't manage to deliver any freedom to the galaxy. But yeah, this is my normal voice. Apparently, it's a bit deeper, and obviously, it's a lot more conversational. I'm going to bounce off each of you. I am an interjector into conversations. You talk over each other, and that's real, and we're missing that, I feel.
I think you bring up a really interesting point that it has come up a bit in this series that is so important for us to remember, that we at Common Descent, we call it podcast voice, or tour guide voice, or radio voice even, that we're not putting on I mean, this is pretty close to how I sound when I'm just talking, especially if I get really excited. But in trying to make ourselves clearly understandable, in trying to be loud enough for the microphone to pick it up clearly, in trying to enunciate, in trying to get away from those things that make a conversation difficult to understand sometimes.
Trying to be engaging.
Energetic. We do end up losing some of what normal human conversation sounds like.
Yeah. I was really interested in you talking about the sense of authority in the voice that you use for a situation like this, because that's something that would come up when I would train tour guides, and talking of, like, not only do you need to speak up and be able to talk over a crowd because they need to be able to hear you just factually, but if you're leading the tour, you need to be able to kind of take charge. You can't be like, could you please follow me? Like, you need to put some oomph behind it so that they pay attention and follow you, because you need to keep them together and safe. Because if we're going behind the scenes, they can't go wandering off and wander into the filter area where they could get hurt. And you have to code switching, which I've heard that term, but I had never connected it to this. You have to take on a persona that may or may not be very close to who you actually are in a conversation.
Yeah. One of the things it doesn't, to me at least, when we're doing the podcast, it doesn't feel like we're necessarily faking the way that we sound. Although every now and then I will absolutely we'll have a moment where Will will say something and I'll respond with just genuine enthusiasm, and I'll say, yeah, that's really cool. But then some noise happens or something in the background, so I have to re-say it.
Yep.
And I will find myself summoning the exact same genuine enthusiastic sound and saying, yeah, that's really cool. And then reflecting on myself like, that was absolutely faked enthusiasm.
Yes.
I did just replicate that enthusiastic sentence. There's performance happening.
Yeah.
And understanding these kinds of things are what I think are really important in science communication. And it goes far beyond just like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast because there's a gap for it here. Nobody's got the Trilobite podcast. There's a gap. Someone take that up. But then there's so much more to be thinking about. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? Who are you trying to reach? And getting an appreciation of that over this 12 years that I've been doing Palaeocast, building up this appreciation, and then working with a lot of collaborators, science communication professionals, and more importantly, also the science communication researchers, because it's a whole field in and of itself. And I've got a collaborator, Dr. Laura Hobbs from University of West of England, who's been absolutely fantastic as a geologist and science communicator, and seeing what she's been doing and how she can bring in different demographics into an outreach project and designing things for these people, and the things that she's been able to introduce me to, the concepts, the science communication theory and best practices. And it's really eye-opening. And the more that I've learned about this, the more I've been able to look at what it is that I do with Palaeocast, and then hopefully improve that for the better. It's a big journey. It's in the 12 years, so much has changed, not only in the technology, but also in science communication theory, but then also in my perceptions of what it is that I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Please talk more about that. You've obviously Palaeocast, other projects alongside Palaeocast. How has your perspective on science communication changed in this now over a decade that you've been doing it?
It's been a big deconstruction, being from a place of like, I am doing this podcast, and I am doing the podcast because I know about paleontology and the world needs to know about paleontology. I am in the middle of doing it, and everyone will love it, hopefully, and that's about as far as I thought of it. And now it's just scaled back and back and back, and it's like, oh no, I really do need to start thinking about that. I really do need to start trying to engage more, or to take the podcast into different places. If I can't just expect the world will come to me. I can't be just assuming that what I am doing is okay, that it's landed, that it's, I mean, being the first, it's very hard to recognize that stuff because, you know, like I'm the paleontology podcast, and then everyone's coming to me just for the paleontology podcast. It doesn't mean that I got it right. It means that I was the only one at the very start, pretty much.
This has come up in other episodes of this series, that sense of after you've been doing it for a while, having that moment of turning around and going, oh, am I doing it wrong?
Yeah.
Look at all these new great podcasts and these younger science communicators or new projects that are doing such fantastic things. And it really puts it into perspective for us with our several years long podcast to start to reflect on where could we have improved along the way? Where were we maybe incomplete in our idea of what this was going to look like when we started?
Having those moments of, oh, that would have been a good idea, wouldn't it have?
Yeah.
Just seeing someone do something and going, that makes so much sense. Why am I just now realizing that makes sense?
And a big thing as well is I like to be an early adopter of technology, if possible. So something like paleontologizing on Twitch. I don't know if you guys have watched that. That is a fantastic show in terms of its ability to bring paleontological knowledge and education to an audience where the audience is, and with the kinds of formats and engagement styles that the audience is wanting. And understanding that, you know, we're here doing a podcast, but, you know, a podcast isn't for everyone. I do not listen to podcasts anymore whatsoever. Like I've completely moved away from them. And if I am going to engage with any kind of content, it would probably be on YouTube, I guess. Twitch, maybe. And it's mostly going to be either news or computer gaming is most of the digital media I look at. So something like gaming, is there any way that you can find a new audience through that medium and bring them paleontological information in a way that they are going to feel like they want to engage with it, that will resonate with them, that will meet them in the place and with the kinds of content that they are interested in? And for that reason, like, Palaeocast has spawned off a load of sub-projects and different projects and sister projects to try and bring paleontology and Palaeocast from outside of audio, outside of podcasting, into wherever these audiences are. And so, for instance, the Palaeocast Gaming Network is trying to communicate through creating gameplay videos and reviews and the kind of content that people are engaging with, relating to the computer games that they're playing, which might not contain all of the paleontological information that they would be interested in finding out about. I mean, they're engaging with paleontological computer games, but those games are not set up for the communication of paleontological science. They're set up to entertain. So is there a way that we can bring the education into this space for them. And yeah, that's how that project gets started, and we've found an audience there and are looking to build that. And there's potential audiences everywhere, whether it's podcasting, live streaming, gaming. What else could be next? There's always something that could be just around the corner.
Yeah. I feel like this is sort of a constant mission for science communication, whether it's podcasting or in a museum or in a classroom, whatever it is trying to look around and see, what are people excited about? What are the kids into? Can we use these different angles to communicate science? On our podcast, we very often go off into side projects about movies, or we'll talk about video games, specifically because we're trying to do that very thing. We're trying to say, here's a place you're already excited, you're already putting your attention in this direction. Let's see if we can sneak some paleontology in there. Let's see if we can hitchhike on that existing enthusiasm.
Well, and it's also trying to acknowledge and examine who are we probably missing, because that is an extremely good important point. Like you said, not everyone's a podcast listener. Not everyone is into taking in their information through listening or through watching. They might prefer to read it, or they might prefer it to be a Q&A where it is interactive, and acknowledging those things, that there are some people you're going to be missing either because they don't prefer this or they can't interact with it. They
don't have access.
They don't have access to it, or deaf people, a podcast is not going to be nearly as helpful. So like there are people that this is going to miss, and so broadening out can only hopefully help that. The wider the net you cast, hopefully you can catch more people that could then enjoy it and actually feel included.
So I think a big distinction for me, and something that I'll always try and do with Palaeocast, is not try to reach as many people as I can with Palaeocast, just being like, there's an audience here, there's an audience there, like get as many ears as possible listening to the show. It needs to be audience focused. It needs to be, how can I best make this available to you? How can I facilitate this for you? How can we get you in a way that is most comfortable, efficient, and easily accessible as possible? Because ultimately that is the best way that you can get people, and the most people, in a way that suits them. Because, for instance, as I was saying with the live streaming that I was saying, it's a brilliant way of getting it into that audience, and the podcast is a brilliant way of reaching that audience. It doesn't suit everyone. If you're live streaming, only a subset of people at any time are going to be watching. I live stream between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Okay, so then you're only doing it for people who are at home at that time, and then you're only doing it for people who live in that time zone, who have access to the internet with a decent enough connection. You've always got to be looking at these things, and yeah, maybe a podcast will work for these people, but maybe a live stream will work for those. It's diversifying where and how you do your science communication to make it as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, to target the needs of these different audiences.
Yes, that's a lot more concise.
And those considerations, I find, really put into perspective how useful it is, how valuable it is to have collaborators, to have a diversity of people and projects out there address. Because we'll absolutely, we here at the podcast, we'll have conversations about, here's all these ways we could reach more people. Here's all these ways we could engage with different audiences. And it very quickly becomes extremely daunting.
Yeah, there's no way for us to hit all of them. We're physically incapable as just two people.
Yeah, it really pulls our limitations into sharp focus. And it's one of the reasons why it's so nice to have projects coming from different people, coming from different places, to be able to use, hopefully, what we're doing. And this is something that you've also done with Palaeocast, of course, to help support and increase the effectiveness or increase the reach of other people who are doing these projects that we ourselves can't do.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think it's a really important thing for us to do with our platform and to signpost these other projects to our audience.
Yes.
So,
yeah, it's one of the reasons behind why we're doing this Spotlight series, to really take a look at ourselves and acknowledge the fact that the vast majority of our podcast is me and Will talking about stuff.
Yes.
And opportunities to get more voices on here, and with something like this, to shout out to other projects, other places where people can learn about paleontology and related topics in formats that might work better for them. You might, hopefully, some of our audience who thinks we're just fine will really like some of the other people that they hear in this series, and then go over there and learn from them.
Yes. That it might click for you in a way that something we're doing just doesn't.
Our nonsense 2-hour-long episodes might not appeal to you.
And hopefully if any of your audience like the sound of, like a 40-year-old man from Manchester sitting in his office chatting away about bugs, then please feel free to check out Palaeocast.
The doors are open.
Yeah.
I think that what I know about internet demographic data as it relates to the kind of content that we produce, there is a vast audience for 40-year-old men talking about niche topics into a microphone.
Yeah. We are a lot of 40-year-old white men with podcasts.
We are.
Yeah.
And it is part of that, the same conversation we were having before about recognizing what our voices mean and the way we portray ourselves and the topics that we put out there, the audiences that we're able to reach. A lot of people who do podcasting are cut from the same cloth.
Yes.
In very many ways. So being able to point people, at the very least, point people in the direction of other types of people doing other types of projects is better for everybody and for the field as a whole.
Absolutely.
Dave, of course, there have been a bunch of other projects, you've mentioned some of them, that have sort of dovetailed with Palaeocast, things that have spun off of Palaeocast. Are there projects that you are particularly happy with? Are there projects that have really taught you things? What sort of other projects have you gotten to enjoy doing alongside the podcast?
I think the computer gaming is definitely the thing that I enjoy doing the most and that we've had the best engagement with doing. So that is very validating to see myself having jumped into that space. And I love, like telling my mum, like I'm a YouTuber now. She's like, great. I'm so glad we put you through university for this. This is a great end goal.
All those years learning about Eurypterids and whatever the other things you said were before.
Yep. There you go. There's some effective science communication right there.
It started with a hard C sound. I remember that.
Yeah. And then other things, like if I can see like the reach that we get with a project, it's incredibly validating. So something like a lot of the conference live streaming that we've been able to do, going and uploading all of those to YouTube, like it takes forever to edit them and to get the audio sounding passable.
Yeah.
With the rubbish equipment that we have, like we were able to do this all for free. So that's the caveat. And then half of the presenters don't wear the microphone. Ugh. Anyway, when you've spent the time rescuing it and you see a conference talk that has had 50 to 100 people in a room, tops, learning about that, and then you've live streamed it and you get, like an extra 10 people. And it's like, why am I doing this? Then you upload it to YouTube and you end up getting 3,000 extra people. And you're just like, wow, this has just increased this by a huge amount. And then some videos will go absolutely bonkers and you'll get 10,000 or 20,000. And you're like, okay, now now you can really see, and you get the validation from being able to bring that to people just by virtue of you sitting in the back of a conference filming something. It's great. And when you get if, for instance, I've been doing some sort of press release, writing one of those for a study, not necessarily even in paleontology. I did a lot of this when I was at the University of Bristol, and I did some for nuclear physics, and I've done some for biology. And when you take an idea that is, just a paper that needs communicating, and you just think like, oh, this would be best shown in this way, maybe. And I work on a script for a video and direct the animation, get an animator in and do a voiceover. And then I've seen like an idea go from a paper that wasn't picked up by anyone, really. It got like a little bit of traction academically when it was coming out, but then to then see it go out as a press release, to then see the millions of people roll in, and to see the tangible effect. And I was in a research unit, an institute, and I was doing the science communication for them. And I made them this video, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll take a punt, and we think it's a good story, and we'll put some money towards it. But then to see the impact that it had when the phone started ringing with people that had seen this story, this video, and the inbox started pinging, and there were just emails flooding in with people who wanted to know more, with potential investors for this technology that wanted to know more, that had watched this video, and you start to see the real tangible impacts of what you've done. Like, that really is super validating, and is what incredible. I get from science communication, and the importance of, using your talents not just on this podcast, but to take it elsewhere and to do something else with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it really does provide an avenue to start getting that dialogue we were talking about before. Once people are able to reach out, to say what they like, to ask for more, it helps you to then decide what comes next, and to decide what information people are hungry for, what information people are interested in. And not to mention that when we get nice comments from people, it helps the podcast happen. Yeah, we're always shouting out, our patrons, of course, because they are tangibly supporting us with actual money. But every email or comment that we get from someone who says that they liked it provides that heart fuel.
Yes,
that lets us know that it's working, and that people are enjoying it, and that people are listening to it. We used to talk in the early days. The first several episodes of the podcast were so weird, because you record a thing, you work on it, you put it up on the internet, and then it just sits there. And as far as you know, no one in the world has listened to it.
Yes.
You're shouting into the void until you start getting that feedback from people, letting you know that there is an audience for this, and there are people who appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really nice when you get that. And yeah, I've had, as I've said before, people say that it's what got them into paleontology, and or inspired them to go down some route or whatnot, or use it as a resource. The number of times I've had just random emails turn up saying like, oh, can we use this podcast in our unit in paleontology, like teaching undergrads? Like, can we use the audio? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, seeing those impacts, it's absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love it.
Well, and it helps to, combat, and then every now and then maybe exacerbate a little bit that sense that we were talking about this before we officially started recording. And it has also come up in many of the other discussions we've had with our other guests during this series, which is that paleontology podcasters in general seem to share that deep down sense that we don't actually know what we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, we're trying a thing, and maybe it's working, but we're not actually sure. And if we're successful, we don't know how we got here.
Yep.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think I am very lucky to have entered the field of paleontology podcasting as and when I did. I have flown by the seat of my pants. I adopted the method of which I create podcasts very early and have changed very little, and yet still am here, still going, and hopefully still appreciated and enjoyed by the audience. And yeah, I look back and I think, how has that happened? But then, evolution happens in nature as it does in ideas and podcasts, and the good ideas stick, and hopefully you end up getting better and not going extinct.
Yeah.
And we're still going.
That's true. Somehow
Yes.
we are all still going.
I felt your description of adopting the way you do things early on and changing it very little. We've had those moments of like, yeah, that we just started doing it that way because it was the way that made sense, and then it never broke, so we never stopped.
It's really strange getting new presenters in though, and they'll say like, "Oh, what's your process for this? Why? How does this filing system that you have work?" And I'm just like, it just happened like this. This is the way it is, but it doesn't have to be like that. They're like, when do you put your intro music in? At the start or in the middle, or like, do you talk over the bed? What's your first opening question? Do I need to ask them how they got into paleontology, the interviewee? And I'm just like, I don't know. No, you don't have to do it that way. That's just the way I've done it.
Yep.
And it's kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's very funny. We'll get people who will ask. They'll say, do you have any advice for people who want to do podcasting or even get into the science? And there's that sense of, well, we kind of have tripped and stumbled the whole way and somehow made it work. We have been very lucky.
Yes.
Which is very important. There are a number of factors that have allowed us to be in a position to make a podcast work the way that we have for as long as we have, that not everybody else is going to be as fortunate to have those same circumstances. So for so many reasons, what has worked for us very likely will not work for you.
Yeah.
Is it rich parents?
Well, neither of us has rich parents.
Not rich parent.
But we do have various support systems, both in sort of personal support systems and systemic support systems that make it harder for us to fail at things like jumping into a podcast and dedicating our lives to doing a podcast for several years.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's like you're talking about people asking, how to get into the field. I get that question, especially at the museum. People, it's like asking for a high schooler going into college, what courses should they take? And it always was hard to be like, well, it 100% depends on what they're interested in going at. Like my college did not have any paleo classes, but I liked animals, so I went with biology with the hopes that would eventually let me study fossils. It's very hard to, when you feel like, well, I don't know that I did it right. So
my best advice is go ask somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, who did it the right way. I got here. I don't know that I should have.
Which is another one of the things that's so great about there being more and more paleontology podcasts out there, SciComm projects. The fact that this series that we're doing right now even exists is fantastic. There are so many people doing things like this. And it allows us to say, the way we did this might not work for you, but here's several other people who are doing something in a different way from a different starting point, who in some ways know what they're doing more than we do, or who have a better approach than we do, or who got started on a better foot than we did. Learn from that. We are learning from that.
Yes.
And that's really fantastic.
I've got nothing to add to that. That's summarized it quite well.
Great. We did it. We came to the end. Dave, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. We've had a great time.
No problems. I enjoyed talking about myself for an hour, so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Gladly.
It is one of the things that we have learned to be very comfortable. This is a series I think that we probably wouldn't have been able to do like we're doing it 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Because this series exists because we have gotten to a point where we are very comfortable coming in with a general plan for what this is going to look like, and then trusting that podcasters are gonna podcast.
Yes.
And let's sit us all down in front of microphones and ask questions that are generally interesting, and a conversation will happen, and we'll edit out all the rough parts because, like we were saying before, all of this is just a little bit fake.
Yes.
It's a little bit put on at all times.
Yep.
Before we wrap everything up, Dave, please, if you would like, take the opportunity to let our audience know where they can find you, or if there's any projects that you want to shout out. Now's a great time.
I want everyone to go on to palaeocast.com/paleontology podcasts. It's under other shows on our website.
Oh, we can put a link in the description as well.
Yeah. Let's do that. And there I'm compiling a list of all the different paleontology podcasts. And we should do different things as well. We should do like YouTube channels and other different outreach projects and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I will say that list was a helpful resource when planning this series.
Oh, you're welcome.
2024. So thank you very much for putting that together.
Yeah, check that out, because as much as we would love for you to stick with us and listen to us, there's a different paleontological podcasty voice out there that potentially could be better suited. So listen to them all and find what's right for you. Listen to all of them, and you will be never short of wonderment of the world of paleontology.
We should link to that list.
We could put it on our website.
Yeah, because that's an awesome list.
You also have the Palaeocast Gaming Network.
Oh yeah, that as well.
Which has had a bunch of stuff. At least one of our other guests on this series has been on that.
Yes.
On Palaeocast Gaming. I know of. We had Gavin.
Oh right, yeah. Hi Gavin.
Fantastic. Listeners, we'll put some of those links in the episode description so you can go check out Palaeocast and its associated and Palaeocast accessories in their various forms. Also, listeners, do remember that this is a series that we are doing all throughout the year of 2024. There are several other episodes where we sit down to talk with other guests about science communication, paleontology, podcasting, and so on. At this point, I haven't been doing this every episode, but because we talked about that dialogue between us and our audience, I want to make a special shout out to the fact that the list of questions that we used to structure and come up with the plan for this series was submitted by patrons.
Yes.
So our patrons gave us the starting point for preparing for these interviews. So thank you to our audience for helping to make this series possible. Dave, once more, thank you for joining us. Thank you for, in so many ways, paving the way for paleontology podcasting as it exists today. I promised we wouldn't say too many nice things about Dave, so I'm going to sneak one in right there at the end.
Oh, no, you can say nice things about me, not the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Give me the compliments.
Excellent.
I am looking lovely today.
The Dave Marshall site and listen to the Dave Marshall podcast.
Oh, God. It's so awful.
Well, then, drawing on your experience in videography, a round of applause from all of us to end this podcast.
That's
Thank
really
you so
polite.
much.
I like that. We should normalize this.
As we've landed the podcast successfully, and we can all applaud. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. Thank you, Dave, so much for participating. Everybody, check out Dave's podcast, our podcast, and have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.